Welcome to another serving of Gin and Scotch. In this episode, Kyle and I discuss our experiences listening to John Coltrane's Blue Train and Butthole Surfers' Electriclarryland. We also talk about Audiophiles, music remakes without the heart, skating to punk, and local musical talent Brian Kinney Fresno. We even have new theme music created by Kyle and sound effects for transitions by Steve. So pour yourself a fresh cocktail, sit back, and enjoy this episode of Gin and Scotch. What are you drinking tonight?
Tonight I'm drinking the Ardbeg 5-year-old. It's called Wee Beastie. And one of the reasons they call it the Wee Beastie is because when scotches are young, which is typically under 8 to 10 years old, they stay really spicy and really kind of sharp tasting.
Okay.
And this one, if you don't know that much about Islay scotches are smoky and peaty, and they have a lot of kind of peppery notes. This one has even more than that, and I would say it kind of tastes like feet. Which shouldn't be great, but for some reason this absolutely works. So this is the Ardbeg 5-year-old Wee Beastie. What do you have over there?
I am drinking, I will be starting out with a aviation martini.
Fantastic.
With just a little vermouth breathed on it. And 3 olives, and then later I'll probably switch to my aviation and soda.
Right.
But since the podcast is about John Coltrane's Blue Train, and after listening to it all day, I feel really fucking cool.
Yeah, right.
It's like immediately, like you just get doused in coolness.
Right.
And you just feel like a cooler human being.
Yeah.
I figured as the subject matter, I had to be drinking martinis.
It definitely fits. The 3 olives just makes it premium. I saw a 3 olive martini in some show this week, and it was cool. They were just like, I want it this way with 3 olives, and you're like, that's cool.
That's the way to do it, man.
Right.
So cheers.
Cheers. Yeah.
Proper.
It's sharp. It's spicy.
It's proper. All right.
It's a beast.
So my assignment was to review John Coltrane, and
Yes.
you were to listen to
The Butthole Surfers, Electriclarryland, which of course is a play on Jimi Hendrix, his studio, which is Electric Ladyland.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Electric Ladyland was his, I believe his New York, might have been London, but one of his like recording spots.
Right.
So the Buttholes, in their infinite wisdom, did a play off that, and it's pretty funny. I was surprised at the musicianship on this record after you were like, you know, this is a punk record, and this, and so like, I got, I don't know, I got an interesting vibe off of it. Yeah,
no, it's kind of interesting because it's not one of their earlier stuff. They started in, I think, 86.
Mm-hmm.
And that album dropped 94, 95. So they'd been on the scene. But the term alternative music didn't exist in 86. And so they try to peg them as these alternative bands. But no, this is just old school punk through and through.
Right.
They're just incredibly talented punk.
Yeah.
I think at one point you'd mentioned when we'd been talking, I don't know if it was on the podcast or not, that if you're not just playing 3 chords, it's not punk. But I think by the mid to late 80s, it got a little bit more sophisticated in its sound.
Well, these guys are definitely more sophisticated in their sound, and the musicianship is higher than I expected. I thought you were going to hand me something a little bit more raw, and I was pleased to kind of hear the sophistication of what was going on in this record.
So give me your first interpretations and
Okay. So let me get to my list of thingy dingies.
And did you also listen to the bonus track that I suggested as well? That's not a part of the original album, but was released with the original album for like the first 3 months.
I don't know if I did that.
Okay. So for the listeners, the bonus track is I Had a Dream, or whatever. And it was on the Leonardo DiCaprio, Claire Danes, Romeo and Juliet movie that came out in the 90s. And I don't know if they wrote it specifically. I believe they wrote it specifically for the movie, to be perfectly honest, because John Leguizamo has a soundbite in the song. And the song is very thematic about Romeo and Juliet. It was released with Electriclarryland for like the first, I guess, cutting. It was like an extra disc they had with Electriclarryland CD.
Oh, okay. So, so here's a connection I made. In the song TV Star, he's, I'm in love with the TV star. And the song goes on, but if you're familiar, and I'm not that familiar with Bruce Springsteen, but it lines up perfectly with the song, everybody has a hungry heart. Everybody has a hungry heart.
Oh, yeah, it does.
You
it
did
really
the
does.
money and you play your part. And I was like, is this the same song? I bet you could mash them together pretty easily.
I bet you could.
Right.
I wonder if they were doing a parody or a riff on it.
Right. Or as what happens so many times with musicians, you'll hear, Hungry Heart on the radio, and then you'll come home and you'll start to write a song, and that melody will be stuck in your head.
Oh.
Because George Harrison wrote a song that was exactly another song by like the Shondells or something like that. And he wrote the song recorded it and everything. And then someone was like, that's a total ripoff of this other song. It's like an exact copy of it, just with different lyrics. And he's like, oh, son of a gun. I got that melody stuck in my head and I thought it was mine.
Right.
So this could be that phenomenon, because I've seen TikToks and stuff of other people talking about it, how like, I wrote 3 songs last night and I'll play them for my friend, and it's like, oh, that's this song, and that's this song. And I'm like, oh, so I didn't write any songs last night.
Yeah, in comedy, because I watch a lot of comedy and comedic interviews and whatnot, Dane Cook and Louis C.K. are from the Boston area, I believe.
Yeah.
And their comedy is 10 years apart. As far as like their age group and when they got involved and everything like that.
Right.
They both have a very similar bit. I think it was about like just having like a single letter for a child's name or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And it's very similar. Dane Cook apologized. He said he didn't realize. And going down that rabbit hole of that experience and hearing from other comedians about other stuff, there is a thing like called crypto memory or something like that, I think it was called.
Right.
It is basically it gets stuck in your head, and you think it's an original idea.
Right.
But you're heavily influenced by outside sources.
Right.
And if someone doesn't tell you, hey, this is this, you think it's yours.
Yeah. I mean, George Harrison wrote a whole song and recorded it with the Beatles.
Right.
And then they sued him, and he was like, oh, you know what? That's my bad. And he like signed the publishing money over to them. He was like, well, I didn't write it, so why should I get any money for it? Like,
yeah, well, that's
owned it.
That's the right thing to do.
Right.
He was like, I made that mistake. Sorry.
Right. And that's one of the things that Rogan had a problem with, that one comedian,
Carlos Mencia. That's actually not what happened.
Because Mencia wouldn't apologize for anything. He was just ripping people's stuff off. No, and Rogan was like, forget it.
Yeah, he was not actually suffering from crypto amnesia or whatever.
He was just ripping people off.
He was just blatantly ripping people off. And
yeah, he would change a couple words or make it a different subject, but the same joke.
He would just steal the joke, like to the point that guys didn't want to go on before him. And they didn't want to work the same night as him at the Comedy Store.
Right.
And you're like, okay, well, there's some nuances there. And Joe Rogan had a video where he calls him out and everything. But
it's a great video, by the way.
It really is. But there are other sources that came out afterwards of other cinematographers and other videos of that people made, audio recordings of my favorite one was Carlo Macias calling into a radio station to say his side of the story. Mm-hmm. And the radio station was really close friends of Carlos Macias. They're talking and everything, and Carlos says, yeah, well, I'm working on this, and this. And he goes, all right, great talking to you. Have a nice day. Carlos hangs up, and the DJ turns to his other co-host, and he's like, he's never going to come on the show again. And they're like, what? Why? What did he do? And he goes, everything he just said was part of a DJ retreat I went to a year ago. About skits to do on the air. Like, there's no... And he's like, and he was there. And it's like, no, it was totally ripped off. So that's not the same thing. That was just blatant plagiarism on that front. But yeah, no, I can see as a musician, because there's so many layers to music, where you get the melody in your head.
Right. Well,
and then you're creating, you're creating your own words.
Yeah, there's the three things that you can copyright, which is lyrics, melody, and it's mostly just lyrics and melody. Like chord changes, you can't copyright. Drum patterns, bass lines, you can't copyright any of that.
Really?
So it's just lyrics and melody. So,
see what would be interesting about that. No, because then you can patent the machine. I would say you could, because with drums, like a double kicker, right? Mm-hmm. The rhythm you'd get off a double kicker as opposed to a single kicker, you are able to get more beats per minute with that double kicker. I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
Well, and if you had a third one there, right? But at that point, you're creating sounds off of mechanics, and you can patent the machine that makes the sound. So I guess that's different in that regard.
Well, what somebody did is they went through and they made a computer algorithm that created every possible melody that you can create out of the 12 notes. That's like, I don't know, 8 or 10 notes long.
Right.
And they made every single one that's possible. So they used every rhythm and every order of notes, and they submitted it for copyright. So technically, they broke the copyright system with this computer program that they wrote, because they now own every melody that anyone could ever make throughout the remainder of time.
Subtracting melodies
subtracting the lyrics or melodies that have already been written. But basically, what the courts have said is, no, you can't do that. It has to be a real song.
Yeah, there has to be, like, you can't just have a machine, like...
Right, it can't just be computer notes and you're, like, playing this game with the law.
Well, this is one of the things that really concerns me about artificial intelligence. And
it's coming.
It's coming. And I saw music videos pop up on Instagram this week where AI does all the animation. Mm-hmm. And it's the original song, but the AI comes in. It's beautiful stuff.
Right.
But how many people just lost their job over that?
Tons.
Right. Like, yeah, it's more efficient, everything, but it, like, we've improved. And then I see AI for writing. And sure, it's kind of professional writing where you put in keywords like sexual harassment and, filling out the proper TPS reports.
Yeah, I mean, bots are all over social media. They're doing all kinds of automatic stuff. I barely signed up for Reddit the other day, and the first person that friended me was this Reddit bot, and I was like, hello, I'm a Reddit bot, and I'm following you. And then I looked at all their posts, and it looked like a person.
Right.
But it's not. And they're like posting things and sharing things and writing things, and it's all fake.
Yeah.
Man, it's crazy.
So it's a little as an artist, I understand the need for AI for, like, scientific pursuits.
Right.
There is a place where our brain cannot function fast enough to keep up with the computation needed to further science in certain regards.
Right. It's hard to send a rocket to Mars using a slide ruler, even though they did that with the moon.
Right.
It's still hard.
It's still hard.
It's safer to do it with a computer.
Right. Well, there was and they did a movie on it. I can't remember the name of the movie. It was about 3 black women who were part of NASA. And
they were the human calculators.
The human calculators and the first programmer and everything. And it's historically accurate. It did happen. I can't remember if it was John Glenn or one of the other ones, but he was like, I'm not hitting the go button until she confirms what the computer told me.
Right.
Right. And now the flip side is I'm not hitting the button until the computer confirms what she told me.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, so the album, so that was cool.
Right.
So do you know who he's singing about?
Is it Christina Applegate?
That's who I think it is too. I didn't look it up. I didn't do a deep dive on it, but I've always just kind of held it because when it came out, that Married with Children was
I was
huge
alive
hit.
in the 90s, and I wanted to date her a lot, and so did everyone I knew.
Yeah,
she was.
Fun fact:
she was a hot bimbo, right? Yeah, fun fact: everyone wanted to do that. She was hot, and she was a bimbo, and she wasn't that bright. And I was like, these are all traits that I think I could capitalize on.
Oh man.
So, yeah, and I'm sure she sailed 1,000 ships, among other things. So that was my TV star takeaway.
For the listeners not getting that reference, Helen of Troy was said to have been so beautiful that her face was on the mast of 1,000 ships. That they sculpted the mast of all the ships to look of her likeness. So
she was so hot that it was like, I'll send 1,000 ships to kill whoever you want me to kill. Just I'll do whatever you say. Just
pointing out that originally when you said that, it sounded like you said, well, she slept with 1,000 guys.
No.
I was like, no, that's not the case. That's not the reference you're trying to make.
No. Yeah, it was definitely a classical reference. So, the first tune on the record is like classically punk. It's just a couple chords and he's yelling the whole time and it's really grating and I don't like it. It's my biggest problem with punk is that it's just kind of, and I'm glad I remembered this point. It's just kind of raw. And so the thing I wanted to bring up with that take on it is whenever I heard techno in the 90s, I'd hear that and I'm like, this is so easy, anyone could make it.
Right.
So ever since the 90s, I've been trying to make techno, and all of my techno is terrible.
Really?
Yes. And as we've talked about, I have some musical training.
You do?
Right. So
I'm really good at techno.
Mine is terrible. And one of the reasons is probably because I haven't struggled enough to understand what's going on. I just felt like, oh, this is a simple music, and you just go do 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 do, and then it's techno, and it's like, who cares, right?
You gotta fill it in your balls, man.
Right. So if it's so easy, how come I'm not Daft Punk? Right? How come I don't have $50 million off of techno? Because it's harder than it looks.
Okay. Yes. And I'm not that great at techno either. But I would like to point out that you are an incredible musician. I've seen several of your shows with the groups that you've played with, and I've seen a couple of the groups you've played with. Mm-hmm. You play with incredible musicians.
I do.
And you guys don't have $50 million from your hit song. So
No.
So I wouldn't
If it was 1932, I could make a living doing what I do, playing lead trumpet in a jazz orchestra.
Right.
But it isn't.
Well, I'm just pointing out, I wouldn't hold myself to that standard of techno's so easy, I should make $50 million. Because, I mean, the stuff you're really, really good at, you're still not making
right.
50.
Daft Punk can't do what I do, and I can't do what Daft Punk does.
Exactly.
But my point about that is that a lot of musicians get caught up in this, oh, this sounds simple, therefore it's easy, and that I could do it if I felt like it. So I don't think for a second that just because one song by the Butthole Surfers sounds simple that I could do it, because I can't. And if I could, why don't I go out and sell, 500,000 records or however many records they sold, right?
Right.
Because if I could, I would.
In a heartbeat.
Why wouldn't I do that?
Right.
I was in a pop band, and I think the most records that the singer-songwriter sold was like 40,000, right?
Right.
And we got to go on, a tour around the country. We went to Hawaii. We went to Cancun. Like, we went a couple cool places, right?
Right.
Got to play in New York City and Chicago, and we were from San Francisco, so we played all over there. And that's 40,000 records, of which I saw zero money. Actually lost a lot of money playing in that band. So, like, the Butthole Surfers are, as the kids say these days, they're cultivating a vibe. And the vibe that they're cultivating is punk, but it is also alternative, because they're using more chords than, I guess my go-to reference is like the Dead Kennedys, where, what's the name of their song? My buddy does the whole Dead Kennedys album on accordion.
Yeah.
And
by the way, I would buy that album. I would totally. I love the Dead Kennedys.
I think I have a copy at my house.
One of my introductions to punk was through. It wasn't Fresh Fruit for Rotten Vegetables. It was the.
I think it's Fresh. Rotting Fish for Fresh Accordionists or something like that.
Oh my God! Yes,
it's so good. If you type accordion and Dead Kennedy, you'll get it because he's the only guy. And like Jello Biafra, like met with my buddy and talked to him about how to sing it and like gave him feedback on the album. So like he's pretty close to the source material.
This makes me so happy.
Right.
Like this makes me so many levels.
I know, right?
Makes me so happy.
So when I think of the Dead Kennedys, I think that's what I think of when I think of punk. And I feel like that the Butthole Surfers are taking that and pushing it in new directions rather than just kind of repeating what they've heard. They've pushed it forward.
Right.
And like the song Pepper. Pepper is such a 90s song.
Right.
So Cake was around and he would kind of like sing. He wouldn't really sing. He would just kind of talk over the music. But it wasn't them trying to do hip hop. It wasn't them trying to rap.
Right. They weren't trying to rap.
Right. They were just kind of like this kind of punk talking or, whatever you want to call it. So, and then Pepper, I heard that everywhere. And, everyone I knew of this song. Like when I thought of the Butthole Surfers, this is what I thought of, but I had never heard any of their other stuff.
Right.
Another thing that I really liked about this record is the psychedelic stuff that they did. Let's talk about Cars is bananas. Like it just starts repeating and it's going in and out and you're like, what is happening right now? What am I even listening to? Right? And they're doing this crazy rhythm where there's no bass drum, but there is a snare drum and the vocals are repeating and just this kind of weird stuff is going on. And it's like punk guys don't always veer towards psychedelia. Like it's more about just aggression and violence. Psychedelia, you kind of, fall back in your seat a little bit and just kind of ride it out.
So, I mean, when you use the term psychedelia, I'm thinking Dropping Acid.
Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Right?
So, as far as my drug experience, and you read my book. I love psychedelics. It's like my favorite thing. And until I found amphetamines, it was like my favorite thing in the world. Right.
I kind of had the same path.
Right. But that was all through the drug scene. Or through the punk scene that I was affiliated with skateboarding at the time.
Right.
So you're right, and they lean towards more of the aggression.
Right.
But how many times I was on acid at a punk show?
Well, it makes sense.
Right. Like you don't feel anything. You're slamming into everything. Right. One of my sisters has a story where she told me like. And she was a punker back in the day, like legit 80s punker.
Right.
And she's like, oh, yeah, no, listening to punk rock, like the Circle Jerks and Brain Dead or Brain Damage and going to school on acid.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, that's a very punk rock thing to do, but the way that they approached the psychedelic thing on this record,
right,
I thought was not as punk as I expected.
Okay.
It was kind of getting into sort of the alternative side of the kind of 90s psychedelic stuff. More like you might hear on a Primus record or trying to think of another band that had aggressive music with crunchy guitars, but also would trip out sometimes. I'm sure it'll come to me later.
So it's
maybe like a Mr. Bungle track or something.
So it's interesting. So Butthole Surfers is on my Pandora.
Uh-huh.
You know where Pandora got its start, right? It's supposed to be like a genome music project where they were trying to connect all the music into like a giant musical family tree, right? Like
right, that's how their algorithm works.
Exactly. So it's really easy to pair at this point. It's really easy to pair like-minded sounds, but you have to curate it to make sure like really random stuff doesn't get too close to the mark that you're shooting for. So on my Butthole Surfers channel, It's Butthole Surfers. You mentioned Cake. Violent Femmes.
Yeah, makes totally.
Pixies.
Yeah.
But what's also funny is they throw in Beck.
All right, I can see that because of the kind of talking.
But it's early Beck.
Right.
And he's gotten so folk. But his stuff was
Beck
really...
now wouldn't fit, but, Forces of Evil on a Bozo Nightmare, the thing with the phony gas chamber, because one's got a thingy and the other's got a what, right?
Yeah, totally. Hey, let's take a quick break right here, and we'll get back with Butthole Surfers in just a moment.
All right.
And we're back, talking about Butthole Surfers and John Coltrane.
So I just went back to one of the tracks, Ulcer Breakout, and that one kind of harkened me back to the kind of more of a rockabilly tie-in, to where the bass player's kind of wailing and jamming, it's distorted. So not that it's a rockabilly song, right, but that it has sort of the rockabilly elements of punk. Like they put rockabilly and punk together and then they made this song.
Okay.
And then, I don't know if I brought this one up before, but Jingle of a Dog's Collar, that one's weird. And it's kind of the quirky 90s, like, look at me, I'm weird, but like in a real genuine way.
Right.
So the refrain of the song is, the jingle of a dog's collar would go great right here. The jingle of a dog's collar would go great right here. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Hey, so the last podcast I did with Mary, we had the dogs in for the first half of it. You can listen to the jingle of the dog's collar for the first half, because we had the dogs in here, and Captain every once in a while would get up and shake his head, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
So if you want to know exactly what he was referring to, just edit that sound, pitch it down, and...
Yeah, right? Yeah. So, my overall impressions of the record are that it was more kind of 90s alternative than I expected. I expected it to be more punky, and I'm sure the earlier stuff would have been. I mean, we're all a product of our time. But I didn't dislike it as much as I thought I would. Like Dead Kennedy, I would never in a million years put a Dead Kennedys album on for listening pleasure. Although I understand what it's for and what it's about and why it's important.
Right.
But it's never something I would listen to because I want to hear music right now.
Okay.
So I thought you were throwing me one of those, and I really didn't have that experience.
Next time I'm like, after this, I'm gonna actually give you a country song to check out that I really like. And then after that, I'm thinking about some really good old classic 1980s punk. You mentioned Dead Kennedys. I fucking love the Dead Kennedys. Just fucking love them.
Wait till you hear this accordion album. My buddy sounds just like him.
Right.
It sounds like they just took the band out and added accordion.
I could take Rioting, the Unbeatable High. Just loop that song over and over. Grab my skateboard and just cruise into the sunset.
Right.
Like, just, it fucking feeds me. So for you to say, I would never listen to punk like that, just like, oh, man, I don't know, man.
Right. Well, that's kind of what inspired me for us to have these conversations.
Right.
Is like, just you putting on like the kind of Irish hooligan bar music, like when we're having drinks or we're playing a game or something.
Oh, yeah.
And like some of that stuff I can get into, no problem.
Flogging Molly, Dropkick Murphys.
Right.
It's really funny, again, because I listen to Pandora, and so, it's that hooligan Irish punk folk kind of infused with Flogging Molly and Dropkick Murphys, but there's Irish groups I've never heard of that pop up because of it. Mm-hmm. And I really turn to that station to get to that stuff, which is more classical Irish pub, sing-along music. folk, because a lot of the Irish pub music is sing along stuff. You know, you got a 3-piece band at the, you know, in a small pub, and they're singing the tunes everybody knows, so everyone drunkenly sings along, and it's a hell of a good time.
And one of the things that draws me into that kind of music is it's not your just typical guitar, bass, and drums, and then guys yelling. There could be a mandolin or a concertina, or there could just be this really interesting instrument that you don't get to hear all the time. So that's one of the things that can draw me in that maybe the Dead Kennedys can't. Like my buddy Bill, our buddy Bill, gave me the Dead Milkmen.
Okay.
In high school, so you know I had Big Lizard in my backyard, and I had the one that had Punk Rock Girl on it, and and I would listen to those for. I think it's just the Milkmen. I don't think it's the Dead Milkmen. No, it's the Dead Milkmen.
Is it? I'm gonna
100%.
Okay, keep talking while I Google this. Very important fact.
You can uvu jabber all you want, but it's the Dead Milkmen.
Okay.
Right. So. And Bitchin' Camaro, but that was almost like the Weird Al of punk.
It is a Dead Milkman, yeah.
Don't front on me, homeboy.
Okay, all right. So, speaking of, Weird Al of punk. Okay, Dr. Demento,
right? Radio
Hour played. Fish Heads,
right?
Which a lot of this stuff, you know, kind of bled into each other.
Fantastic.
Fish heads, roly poly fish heads. In the video,
eat them up. Yum.
In the music video is a young Bill Paxton.
Really?
It's one of the first things he did.
I
think he did that just before Terminator.
Okay, and here's what you get for bringing up Dr. Demento. Brian Kenny Fresno from Fresno has been played on Dr. Demento several times, and he's met Dr. Demento in person.
That's outstanding.
Yeah. And we, being here in Fresno, get to go to Brian Kenny Fresno shows just like, oh, he's at the bar tonight. This is fantastic. And then he does this kind of Dr. Demento-esque kind of Weird Al thing, but all the songs are about Fresno. It's so great.
It's fantastic.
Check it out on YouTube or and your favorite streaming service if you get a chance. Brian Kenny Fresno. It's all about Fresno.
It's all about Fresno. So over under, favorite song from the album?
I hate to be that guy, but it's Pepper.
Okay.
But my next favorite song from the album is...
He's scrolling through his phone, desperately trying to find the one song that really
So L.A. I hated.
Okay.
Because... it's a punk song. But what I liked was... like, if I was putting together a weird song playlist, I would definitely throw Let's Talk About Cars in there. I'd definitely throw Space, like the last tune on there.
So what's funny is, and what's interesting, that's not even, like, their best album. And so in the future, I'm going to be throwing some more Butthole Surfers at you, because they have, I think they have 6 albums before that one, and they have another 10 after that.
Yeah, well, when you have a career that long...
All right, 30 years.
I'm making an album of space jazz that I've been working on since 2020, since the pandemic started.
I've got 5 of those songs.
Some of these songs I started working on in 1996. So that's how long it's taken me to finish one album of one idea. Yeah, song number 2 on my record, I started in 1996 on a Roland D20, which is a keyboard that commands vintage keyboard money now, and it was just the keyboard I had at the time.
Right.
So anyone that has 6 albums is my fucking hero, man. Because as much as I could say, oh, I have a musical training and blah, 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 I've not made 6 fucking albums, and I've yet to make an album that anyone's even ever heard besides my wife.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. But I think you should talk easier on yourself. I mean, if
I've heard a couple demos.
Yeah, well, look, if one of your songs had hit, you would have record money. And record money allows you to spend all day long doing the thing you love in the studio. Because you don't have record money, you have a job.
Right.
So you've gotten one album done.
Well, it's almost...
on top of the fact of working a full-time job.
Yeah.
You know.
It's almost done, and it's not hit it's not like Taylor Swift's going to be like, oh, I want to buy that song and I want to do it. It's like, it's music that you take medicine to.
Right.
Like if you're prescribed painkillers, you're going to like my music.
It's one of the things Mary told me I had to take it easy on myself about, is like, well, I wish I had started writing, in my 20s.
Yeah, well, I did start writing in my 20s, writing music.
But as seriously as I'm writing now.
Right.
Where I'm writing every day and I'm putting 4 to 8 hours into it, and I'm really pushing myself to create. And she's like, yeah, but you for the first part of that, you were on drugs. And then when you sobered up, you got a job where you're working 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
For 10 years. And and I'm only finally in a position where I now can focus on it. And yeah, I've gotten 2 books done, but I've had that opportunity. The time was opened up. Yeah. I'd never have 2 books done if I still had to work 8 hours a day.
Right.
You're wiped.
Well, another thing you can remember is that Samuel L. Jackson didn't have his first acting part till he was in his 40s.
Same with, what's the guy from 48 Hours? Nick Nolte.
Right.
Nolte started in 38. At 38.
There are people that for something that didn't start until way after you and I think, oh man, if I had just started when I was 19, I'd be so far. And like,
there's a thing on Instagram, because we're D&D nerds. And it's...
I'm more of a D&D jock, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, you do play a pretty hefty paladin. But it's something like it goes through like the big bads of iconic, like nerdom, and like Sauron from like Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. Tried to conquer Middle Earth at 5,800 years old, and Cthulhu.
Yeah, give yourself some time.
Cthulhu's like endless, so it's like, yeah, just take it easy on yourself and give yourself some time.
100 million years old. Give yourself a break.
Right.
You got time. That's rad.
I feel like the album you gave me was a lot easier to digest.
Yeah, the first album I gave you was fruity.
Yeah, this okay.
What I gave you this time was like, Miles Davis's Kind of Blue is the #1 selling jazz album of all time.
Yeah.
But this one isn't that far off of that mark. Like, Blue Train is the most accessible Coltrane album. It has Lee Morgan, who's like considered one of the top 3 best trumpet players of all time.
So it was released in January of 1958. And
right.
I went and looked at the
periods in time.
Yeah, I looked up the Wikipedia after I got done listening to it. So, first impressions, the very first song on it, and it's a 5-song album.
Right.
But each song's 7 to 10 minutes long.
Yeah, it's like prog rock, like everything's super long.
But the very first song is Blue Train.
Yeah.
And if you want to have iconic,
totally,
right out of the fucking gate, I could only imagine January 1958 getting this record for the first time, putting it on your record player and listening to it, and just immediately it kicks your feet out from under you.
Right.
You immediately know why John Coltrane is considered one of the greatest musicians of that era.
Yeah.
It's right out of the gate. It is awe-inspiring. So listening to it, I just got this, and like I said, I looked up like the release date afterwards, but like I just immediately got the intro is like a late 50s, early 60s detective movie.
Right. It's like film noir, like
total,
black and white.
Immediately noir.
It's raining.
Oh yeah,
Footsteps at night.
There's a chase. It's got a big city vibe.
Totally.
But before the city got like really bad, just right there on the cusp of everything's still kind of new, but it's in any moment everything's going to tip over, the city goes really dark.
Yeah.
And you totally get the vibe. The album was cut in New Jersey. My assumption is he played in New York and worked in New Jersey to record because the recording spaces is cheaper in New Jersey than New York at the time.
The recording studio is one of the most famous recording studios of all time, and it was recorded by a guy named Rudy Van Gelder, who is considered the greatest jazz recordist of all time. So he knew how to set up the mics and the preamps and run the levels and master the record for vinyl and tape better than anyone.
And so I have to thank you for giving me this and not more of the last one. Immediately, everything's clean.
Oh, yeah.
Every instrument is masterfully played. What was the gentleman's name? Rudy
Van Gelder.
Rudy Van Gelder did an amazing job. Like, everything's balanced. Everything's clean. It's probably one of the cleanest musical compositions right out of the gate.
Right.
And I was jaw-dropped. I was like, this is why people create music.
Right. And when I play it for you on my hi-fi system that I put a few bucks into, it sounds even better.
Right, right.
It sounds great just on, however you can get to it.
I've heard of, I think it was Bert Kreischer or someone was talking about Audiophiles, or maybe one of the gentlemen was on Joe Rogan, one of the hip hop artists, was talking about album stuff and talking about being an Audiophiles. And there's guys who drop $10,000-$50,000 on sound system. And it's like, why would anybody spend that much money when I can get a $20 pair of head? And they talked about how you can hear things that you can't hear anywhere else because it's so crystal clear.
Yeah.
And ever since that moment is like, I would like to see that at one point in my life. I'd like to have that experience. But it's like, okay, I'll just throw it in the back of my mind. And if I ever get the opportunity, I'll rise up and be like, yes, I would like to participate. After listening to track 1, Blue Train, that has changed to, I need to hear this and have that experience.
Right.
Immediately, I need to know what that experience feels like, because the music was so clean, so everything was so just tight. Just tight. Tight but not stressed.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, I totally see why people will go down a $50,000 rabbit hole to purify this. Because once you have that experience, you're like, oh, you got to follow that. You got to follow that addiction.
Right. So following on that, a buddy of mine has a system that's over $50,000. Now he's upgraded throughout time, so he didn't spend it all at once.
Right.
But he has $12,000 speakers and an $800 needle for his turntable that goes on his $1,000 arm, that goes on his $2,000 platter, that goes through his $2,000 power conditioner that just makes the electricity the exact way it needs to be to make the thing sound better. The cables that connect it to the amplifier are
Is he here in town?
$700. No, he's in New Rochelle, New York.
Okay.
Right.
You're getting a plane ticket.
Right.
It cost him over $50,000. It cost me $200.
We would listen to things on vinyl, and you're like, I'm in the room with the musicians. Like, I'm in that room with them. This is a live performance that they're doing in front of me.
Right.
And that's something you can't get from a stream through earbuds. You can get a lot. But once you start throwing money at it, you can get from it sounding from 60% great to 80% great. It would just throwing a couple $100 at it. And then you could throw another couple hundred and get it from 80% to 85%. And now you're throwing thousands of dollars to get it to 87%. And then you're throwing it tens of thousands of dollars to get it to 90% of being in the room.
Right. And that's when you get to the
diminishing returns to where if you throw the price of a cheap used car, like I have, at this situation, you get a certain level of clarity and presence, like you're in the room. But once you start getting to a new car level, you feel like you're there. Like those musicians have traveled through time and they're performing just for you in that room, and it sounds amazing. So and this is a great example of why audiophilia exists.
Right, and I got that impression from track 1. Blue Train was like, oh, I get that now. I understand.
Totally.
The second song I listened to was I'm Old Fashioned.
Yeah.
And it's a love song.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a beautiful...
Ballads were a big thing. Coltrane has a whole album of just ballads.
It's totally... I got that it was... It's not as upbeat as the other songs on the album. But you get immediately that it is a love song.
Oh, yeah.
And then after listening to it, I looked at the title. I was like, I'm Old Fashioned. I was like, I get that.
Right.
And you could get it. You really get the emotional response of it's a story of a man pursuing a woman, and the woman who is interested in the man, but she does things a certain way, and you really get that kind of chemistry between the two of them in the song. Like it's totally it's a love song, but not stakes, just rules. It's not out of reach, but there are obstacles you have to go through to achieve it. And I really feel that emotionally like encapsulates that song.
Yeah. A lot of jazz songs are what they call standards, and standards are songs that are played by lots of different groups. So I've never even looked into this. I'm Old Fashioned might have lyrics. It might be performed by somebody who sings the song.
Right.
And it might be a fast song, it might be a slow song like the way it's performed, but people change it up and they make it their own. And sometimes the jazz quintet or sextet or septet version is better than, somebody trying to sing it in like a pop style of the era. Right. If it's a song from the 40s and they might have been like, Charleston, I'm old fashioned, baby.
Well, you actually just kind of just opened my eyes to something in that one little segment. It's like it's an old standard and people play it different ways, but they're playing it over and over. One of my pet peeves is hearing a classic rock song, being sung by a new artist.
They do that on TV all the time these days. They'll do a cover instead of the original.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Here's my pet peeve. Mostly, not always, but mostly, the artist doing the singing has big tits and a sweet ass, and she sings it slower than how it was originally composed by the artist.
Right. They suck the energy out of it to make it sort of easier for this particular artist to pull off.
Whatever. And it's like, so at that point, that's not an artist. That bitch is a dime a dozen. And I don't mean bitch because I see guys doing the same thing.
Right.
There's certain guys who do the same thing, and they lose all of the emotion of the original composition to do it slower and a little bit deeper so it's in their range and they can hit it and everything.
Yeah. It's some producer trying to capitalize on nostalgia rather than improving the song.
All it is. That is all it is. The Sound of Silence is one of my all-time favorite songs.
It's one of the best songs.
I actually included it in my last book because it's such a powerful song.
Yeah.
I would never in 1,000 years try to make money off of singing it.
Right.
My way.
Yeah.
And there's an artist who I really liked. He's the lead singer for Stained. I think he's an incredible artist. I love his work. I think his version of Sound of Silence is shit.
It's dog shit.
Because he takes all the heart and soul out of the original composition.
Yeah, you just want to say, who the fuck told you to do that?
And he's famous enough. He's doing what he wants.
Sure.
And I'm sure he had a good time doing it because it's a song that I'm like, okay. But mostly it's women. Mostly they get some woman and she's hot and she can sing. But these women are choir singers at every local church in every city, in every town, in every state of this country, where all they do is they just pluck one.
Yeah.
So you're close enough. Lose 5 pounds. We'll put this costume on you. We'll pay you millions of dollars, and you're going to cover someone else's shit.
Well, I think you'll find that they don't offer millions of dollars. People are willing to throw themselves at that. Right. But I'll tell you what,
out,
I'll pay your plane ticket and give you $1,000, and you'll jump at the opportunity to do it.
Not for 1,000. I've got things I'm doing.
Well, I mean, but a lot of these artists would.
Right. There's a little desperation in a lot of people.
Yeah. I ain't singing at church. I'm singing in a studio today.
Well, it's funny as you do that voice. It implies that they're all from the South and poor, when really I think most of them come from the North in major cities
or big money down south,
or big money down south.
Right.
But what you just pointed out is that there may be lyrics to "I'm Old Fashioned,"
right,
and that it was customary back then to play it over and over and do it different ways.
Yeah.
And, with respect to that, yeah, you know what? Maybe I need to be a little bit easier on these people who are just trying to create more art and they're doing it their way. I don't think they're putting the same heart and soul in as others in the past used to. But
well, I certainly don't think that somebody who redid a song in order for it to be played on the latest episode of FBI's on Paramount Plus is doing what John fucking Coltrane did to "I'm Old Fashioned."
Well, here's the thing. Okay, it's not even FBI's on Paramount Plus.
That's just the weirdest show I could think of.
The Batman just came out, and
I really like the Batman.
And they redid Teen Spirit.
Oh, that's dog shit. They should not have done that.
They should have just, look, of all the great Nirvana songs that had the tempo and melancholy that they were trying to because they slowed it down, they made it a lot more melancholy. It's like,
right.
It's Kurt Cobain wrote songs like that.
that are already that sad. That are already sadden it up, bro.
You pick one of those. And give what's her name? His daughter, Frankenbeans, and
Francis, yeah,
Francis, some more money.
Yeah, right.
Because the catalog of Nirvana's catalog, and just look, they're hitting on nostalgia and emotion.
Yeah.
But it's like he already did it,
right?
So why don't you just pick one of his other songs instead of butchering?
I know
the heart of another one. Moving on though, Lazy Bird.
Lazy Bird
is just fun,
right?
I love it. I don't have much to say about it other than I could put that motherfucker on repeat and just go about my day. Lazy Bird is there's something about, I don't know. It didn't bring any visuals to my mind. It didn't bring a story to my mind.
Right.
It was just Lazy Bird. We're having fun. Let's just have a good day.
Right. So I didn't go back into the lore of the album before I suggested it to you, and nor did I do that after I suggested it to you.
Right.
So I don't know if Lazy Bird is like some sort of metaphysical thing of him channeling Charlie Parker, whose nickname was the Yardbird or Bird, who influenced every saxophone player that came after him. Every single one in perpetuity, forever. No one will ever play the saxophone again and say, I play jazz saxophone and be like, oh, Charlie Parker, I don't know who that is. Like, that's just not something that'll happen. So I don't know.
Right.
And I don't know if Coltrane got to play with him or if Coltrane came right after Bird died. But, so I don't know if it's him saying something about Bird or if it just happens to have the word Bird and there's saxophones and I make a connection where there is none. But yeah, it's a great tune to just listen to. And one of the things that I love about this group is that Coltrane has his own style, which is kind of bombastic, and he plays what they call sheets of sound, and he doesn't do that as much on this album, which I thought it was cooler. Like, if I gave you Love Supreme to listen to, it's like amphetamines and LSD and in a monastery and monks and prayer all together, and it just sounds like for like 50 minutes straight.
Right.
And it's just not that cool.
Right.
To listen to. If you get in the history of Coltrane, you can get that it's cool. But it's not something you start with, right?
Right.
It's like one of his last albums, so you have to build up to it.
It's like Always Sunny in Philadelphia. You have to start at episode 1.
Yeah, right.
And watch them in order.
You can't just walk in on the episode where he comes out of the couch and be like, "Oh yeah, I know what's going on."
Oh yeah, that's it. Like, what the hell is this guy doing on the couch? No, you have to start
right. And this is the perfect place, I think, to start with a lot of jazz because you have that rockabilly background,
right.
So you get a lot of the foundations of jazz because jazz and rockabilly, they're from the same place. They all come from the blues.
Right.
Jazz was born from the blues. Rockabilly is another offshoot. Country is another offshoot of blues that went the way of the European music, like it's blues and Irish music.
Oh, okay.
Where jazz is more blues and harmony, which you could say is classical, but it's more of the African American experience, just sort of distilled into like rhythm and blues, and then just sort of building on it academically.
Okay.
So what they say, and they say this in my music appreciation class, is that the country, first they went into bluegrass, and then it sort of grew from there. Country music grew out of the bluegrass tradition. So, what I was really trying to get at was that Coltrane has his own sound on the record. And then you listen to Lee Morgan, and he has a completely different voice. He's not playing the song the same way that Coltrane's playing it.
And that brings me into Locomotion.
Right.
So Locomotion is... So Lazy Bird actually is my second favorite song.
Okay.
Second. I got to know there. Definitely my second favorite song. Locomotion's my first.
Oh, really?
Locomotion's my first.
All right.
And there is a general pacing to it that I like.
Mm-hmm.
It is speed and movement. And you can feel it. You can feel it being absolutely controlled and accelerating at the same time. And it's fast. You can just feel the song just going fast. Now, I want to be very clear about this, is that I'm talking about fast in the observable speed as opposed to timing. It's not played fast, but you get the movement, the fast movement, right? Locomotion really has a flow to it. Really, like, once I got the title, Locomotion, I was like, oh yeah, I could see a train. And like the old animated trains, right? Moving down the tracks, and they're kind of the bobbing all over the place. And Locomotion, you break it down, it's loco. Is it like, are the key roots crazy motion? I don't really know, but I felt this. I did feel like the movement of it just being fast, and there is this motion.
Give me a second to check back in on that tune.
You're looking something up? Or you're looking to listen to it?
Yeah, I just want to hear it real quick.
Oh, okay, 1 second.
Right. Okay.
All right, you're on point. You're like, oh, I know that one now.
Yeah.
By the way, side note, I figured out how to play music through the system, so it comes out on the track.
Oh yeah.
So in the future, once we get like how long it could be before we get flagged for stuff,
gotta worry about.
I can ask you to give me sound bites to queue up, and I can actually queue stuff up to play real quick.
Okay.
And our listeners will be able to listen to it and hear that.
We should do intros. I mean, you could just, if you're listening to this, you can click on the side and be like, oh yeah, that's what they're talking about. But
and maybe it was
we should do little snippets.
Yeah,
at least of the intros.
And so maybe in Locomotion, it had a lot to do with the drums, like. You hear then da 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 da. It really kind of like gets you going.
Yeah.
But what I found interesting, because I like Locomotion a lot, and it's one of the longer songs on the album,
right?
And it never loses that feeling throughout the whole like 10 minutes 7 seconds, I think it is. It never loses that feeling of pace of we're going forward. Boom, let's do this. The next song that I heard, and I don't know if this is the order of the album. This is just the order that I was listening to.
I think it is.
I think it scrambled them around, actually.
Well, Blue Train is first.
I think Moment's Notice is second.
It should be Moment's Notice, and then, well, that I'm not actually sure about.
But how I'm listening to it moved them all around.
Oh, okay.
So then, because I purchased the album, I downloaded it, and then I moved it to my phone so I could walk around the house and listen to it all day.
Yeah.
Moment's Notice, and there's a moment in Locomotion where I couldn't tell if it was a saxophone or a trumpet.
Uh-huh.
And that's important because I don't know what the band's made up of. I know that John Coltrane is a saxophone player.
Yes.
And I didn't know if it was another experience where he's such a good saxophone player that he makes his saxophone sound like a trumpet. I'm like, I don't even know if that's possible, but maybe.
There's a guy that did that on Dizzy Gillespie's Symphony Sessions album, to where I don't remember the name of the guy, but he played on this incredible black lacquered Julius Keelworth tenor saxophone, and he played what's called altissimo, and he played it so masterfully that it sounded like a trumpet because he's playing up so high that you can't really tell the difference. And he's like, bop, 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 and then you're like, oh shit, that's a saxophone.
Right.
So it is possible.
It is possible. Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I probably should have listened to this record too, right. so I could comment.
I feel the same way about Butthole Surfers, and I think I'm going to do that next time.
Yeah, that should be part of the
just
assignment.
before you come over. Just re-listen to the album. So we get into Moment's Notice, and what's interesting about Moment's Notice is distinctly there are two horns. I'm like, that is definitely a trumpet, and that's a saxophone, and they're playing at the same time. So there is two artists. So then my next question is, who is on the trumpet?
Lee Morgan.
Okay. You mentioned Lee Morgan earlier. I don't know who these people are.
Right. Well, there's a trombone in there too, and that's Curtis Fuller, who is my favorite trombone player. Okay. And he's the kind of the lower sounding horn.
Okay. Because I could distinctly hear the bass, I could distinctly hear the piano and the drums.
Right.
Like they are so, but the horns were all kind of mixing together.
Yeah.
And I knew, I was like, well, he said it was a saxophone album, so maybe it's a saxophone. So now I want to go back and I want to re-listen to it. And maybe it's just the quality of the sound system I'm listening at. Maybe this is one of those opportunities where I need to go find, $5,000 stereo system to like distinguish between a trumpet, a trombone, or a saxophone. But
if we were listening to it together and I pointed out, you'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. But Moment's Notice gave me anxiety the first time I listened to it.
Yeah?
It did.
Yeah, because I got anxious from some of the music you gave me, so I'm glad I was able to give it back a little bit.
and on repeated listenings, I think this is the reason why. Locomotion is fast.
Yeah.
And it's movement. And it's controlled. It's on a track. It is a train moving down the track. Mm-hmm. High speeds. It's a commuter train, right? And it's just going fucking balls to the wall, right? Moment's Notice feels like the same amount of speed without the control.
Right.
There is a franticness to it. It felt hurried. Mm-hmm. It felt hurried. But not like the players were hurried to hit the notes. Like I do understand that like hurried is a term used for like drummers who aren't on time, I guess is one of the references.
Rushing.
Right. It was not that. It definitely was not that.
Right.
It was purely the emotion of someone being hurried.
Yeah. That's an interesting takeaway.
The feeling of needing to be somewhere and not being able to find your keys.
As if you were given the call to go record in Rudy Van Gelder's studio at a moment's notice, and they're like, hey, we need 5 tunes. You're like, I only have 4. What am I going to do?
Right.
I'm going to write one at a moment's notice.
Right. It felt like needing to get someplace on time and hitting every stoplight. And that, I believe, is why I got anxious. And this is a very emotional album. Like, not emotional, like sad and it's heartbreaking or anything like that, but it's a very emotional. Like, it really taps into some very basic general emotions that everyone has experienced at some time, some part of their life.
Yeah. I feel like this one taps into more accessible emotions for people than other Coltrane albums. Other Coltrane albums, he plays so many notes that I don't get it. Like, I don't have time to sit back and absorb 50,000 notes in a row. I just can't do it. So when he stops and he takes a breath and he plays a little bit more like Lee or Curtis, who are instruments that typically play slower than a saxophone. Because the saxophone, you blow and you push the button and the note comes out. It's like a piano. They're all there. So as fast as you can touch them, that's how fast you can play them. Well, the trumpet and the trombone don't operate that way. Trumpet's got 3 buttons and can play all the notes.
Right.
Well, you have to know something about physics to figure out how that even works. It's even harder to do Like, I could give you a saxophone. When next time you come over, I'll give you a saxophone and you'll be playing the saxophone in the first minute. And then I'll give you a trumpet and it'll take you a week to get a sound out of it, let alone pick the note you want to play and actually have it come out. So the saxophone can play fast, and saxophone players typically do. And this is a complaint that I give to my wife all the time. So saxophone players play too many fucking notes. And on this album, he doesn't do that all the time. Now, he does it some of the time because he's John fucking Coltrane, right?
Right.
So, but on this album, he doesn't do that all the time. And I think that's what makes it really listenable. And I have Love Supreme, but it's because I'm a jazz musician. I have to have that album.
Right.
Like, you can't be like, oh, yeah, I've got a bunch of jazz on vinyl. And they'll go, oh, do you have Love Supreme? You're like, oh, I don't have that one.
And I just agreed with you. Like, I know what the fuck you're talking about.
Right. But,
so,
but I explained...
real fast. Why don't we take a little break here?
All right.
And we'll be right back.
Okay.
And we're back.
I don't think I'm going to repeat that.
What? And he's lousy at eating pussy. There is a whole Seinfeld episode based on that.
After listening to a John Coltrane album, I've decided that he's probably terrible at eating pussy, is what Steve just said.
Okay, look, that's not me.
I mean, you might be right.
Elaine,
none of us know.
Elaine, in a Seinfeld episode, dated a saxophone player. And it was all about going down on a woman. And he's all, I call the song Hot and Heavy, which is one of the catchphrases, but then he goes down on her. And not only is she completely disappointed about the experience, because, you know, saxophone players and their lips.
They're playing too many notes.
And then when he actually plays at the concert that night, his lips are tired and worn out from going down on her. So then he can't play. So you know.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
So what's really funny about that is they kind of did that bit twice. Then I think the first time was Elaine and the saxophone player. The second time was with Jerry and the gymnast. Jerry dates a Romanian gymnast. And she's like really into him as a comedian. And everyone's like, oh, a gymnast. Ooh, a gymnast. She's got to be fantastic in bed. Oh, yeah, gymnast can really, you know.
Right.
You know. And then afterwards he's like, it wasn't very good. It was really bad. And then afterwards, she's like, you know, in my country, those with the greatest sexual prowess are comedians. And I am so disappointed the sexual experience we had.
Let me go on record by saying trumpet players do not disappoint. There y'all go.
All right. Well, we were talking about you were saying something about hurried keys. I was saying something about hurried keys.
Oh yeah, no, we were just talking about how this particular album of John Coltrane's is one of the more just approachable for anyone, I don't know, off the street, as opposed to some of his albums that are heralded by saxophone players,
right,
but hard for, you know, other people to just kind of get into because he's just playing so much and he's using so much theory and he's being so cerebral and intellectual about it that it leaves a lot of us behind, including me.
Well, I got to say that, my own personal experience, as many fights as I've gotten into when I was younger and everything, I really don't care for fighting. I don't really care. I never cared for the entertainment value of watching someone fight.
Yeah.
MMA never appealed to me. Most aggressive sports never appealed to me. However, there was an incident where I came over to my folks' house. I was visiting for the day. And I was waiting for them to come home, and I popped in the television. And my dad was watching something previously on ESPN2. Mm-hmm. And when I turned it on, I got an Ali fight, an old black and white fight. I cannot tell you who he was fighting.
Right.
And it was back in the day when they were still doing 14, 15, 16 round fights.
Yeah.
And I guess they cup them now. I know nothing about boxing. I know nothing about fighting.
I think it's 12 probably now.
I have no idea.
But yeah, it used to be
But what
16.
I can tell you is this. It was round 14 or 15. and both of the fighters are completely exhausted.
Right.
And they're swaggering, they're swaying. You could tell these are fatigued men.
Right.
And out of nowhere, Ollie just starts throwing blows. Boom, 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 boom. Quick, fast burst. Do. Perfect shots. And I don't know anything about fighting. And I can look at these punches being thrown. It's like, they're fresh. And it was the first time I understood where you stop playing the game plays you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in that moment that I also understood that fighting as a sport and an art form was so much more than I ever gave it credit up to that point.
Right. Like I was talking about how music seems simple. And you're like, oh, I could do that. Oh, you're just punching each other. How hard can it be? Well, it's a fucking art form.
It is. There's endurance. There's all kinds of stuff involved in it. But it as far as, you just mentioned entry level into jazz. Yeah. Sometimes you need the experience of being exposed to a master at his prime.
Yeah.
To understand that there's something more there and it's worth going down the rabbit hole to see just how far it goes.
Yeah.
Since then I've watched more fighting.
Yeah.
I'm still not into it. I'm not into the brutality of it. I don't think it's entertaining for people to get hurt. I do respect it as a sport. The low jack that they have planted so far up your ass with that iPhone.
Yeah, my Apple Watch just said, "I'm not sure I understand the violence," and I was like, "Yeah, we don't understand it either. It's okay.
It's okay, computer." But in the way, yeah, I don't know anything. I don't have the learned history or the you just mentioned the theory and the musical complexity that he was able to execute on the album.
Right.
All I know is that I experienced something incredibly beautiful, and my life is better for it.
Yeah, and that's all I ever hoped to give you a chance to experience.
Well, I wish you felt the same way about Butthole Surfers.
No, I kind of do. No, I kind of do because in the previous episode, I threw you a curveball,
right,
and you threw me a softball.
Yeah.
So this episode was supposed to be you throwing me a curveball and me throwing you a softball.
And I appreciate that.
Right. So, but the curveball that you sent me, I liked way more of this record than I thought I would. Because I thought you were going to send me like a Dead Kennedys kind of just anger and thrashing and we're upset about the government. Blah, 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 blah.
Look, I think,
but it wasn't that at all. There was all kinds of stuff going on this album that I really dug.
I assume you were learned enough to have heard of the fucking Sex Pistols.
Right, but the Sex Pistols doesn't do anything for me,
or the Velvet Underground.
But I like
Radiohead,
Public Image Limited. I like the single that came out of Johnny Rotten or whatever his name is.
Johnny Rotten,
right? Is that the guy that was in PIL? It's like kind of a new wave thing that came out afterwards.
I don't know.
The song was "That's What Friends Are For." But not the Dionne Warwick one, the different one.
Okay, so here lined up here.
Yeah, Sex Pistols, I would never listen to the Sex Pistols as, like, me hanging out.
Really?
Just like I wouldn't listen to the Dead Kennedys, just me hanging out. Or really the Dead Milkmen for anything other than the kind of Dr. Demento shit that they did.
Oh, man, dude. I feel like I smoke a bowl and hang.
But that would send me in the opposite direction.
Well, see, it was like 2 summers ago, I had this War Santana moment where I was just by my little fish tank outside the little pond. And I was smoking grass and just listening to those 2 artists, War and Santana.
Yeah.
I had this really beautiful summer moment. That's how I feel when I think about punk, is drinking beers and smoking a little grass and skateboarding and just having, like, I've had such beautiful days. And you talk about it being so aggressive, and yeah, there's a lot of teenage,
right.
There's a lot of teenage angst in punk,
right?
But I've had a lot of beautiful, like, moments just out and about listening to those records.
I have more friends that have your experience than have my experience.
Okay.
And I think what I'm looking for when I want people to challenge me to listen to punk is I want to have that experience that all my friends are having.
All right.
That I just don't have.
All right. Well, here's
Like
what
when
we're
I
going to
give
do.
you
We're going to take a bunch of shrooms.
When I give you Meshuggah, Destroy, Erase, Improve to listen to as a metal album, you're going to be like, I'm not sure I like being alive at the same time that these people are alive. Like, it's not relaxing.
The only thing I know about Meshuggah is Bill Burr on his Monday morning podcast talks about the drumming.
There's a great YouTube video where somebody animates him talking about Meshuggah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's,
like you look at the drumming and just go, damn.
Yeah. He's playing machine guns with his feet and he's playing metal with his arms, but they're not the same songs.
Right.
On his feet, he's playing one song. On his arms, he's playing another song. He's playing 2 songs at the same time. And then the guitars go back and forth between what song they're playing along with. And the singer is talking about just how bleak existence is. And
it's very nihilist.
Oh my fucking God.
Is that the next album?
But you have to read the lyrics because it's so poetic. These guys are from Sweden. English is their second language, even though they've been speaking it since they were 6. And it's so bleak.
So
they put
culturally,
so much energy
okay,
into
I have
it.
a problem with English is their second language. Culturally, that means something to Americans. Oh, English is a second language. To everyone outside the United States, a second language means dick.
Right.
We put such they speak 2 languages. And then I hear people are like in Europe are like, I'm up to 4 because I got a new job and I've got to like trade with this like group. And so I got to, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
I used to know this guy from the Middle East. He spoke 7 languages.
Yeah.
But he also went to raves every night and had a car that was missing the driver's side door. So instead of replacing the driver's side door, he just put a velvet rope. And he drove around San Francisco in a car with no door, but a velvet rope so he didn't fall out of the car.
Right.
And he would just be like, why are the police hassling me? The rope is the door. Don't they get it? And it's like, you're working with a lot over here, and they probably want to check out just what you're putting down, buddy. And he was up to no good.
Yeah, yes, he was. Yes, he was. So, what is the album that I get to listen to next?
I think it's got to be Destroy, Erase, Improve.
All right, let me write that down. Destroy, DESTROY, Erase, Improve.
Yeah.
Okay, who's that by?
Meshuggah.
Mesh Sugar.
And if you're listening at home and you're wondering, how do we get from John Coltrane to Meshuggah in one step? This is how.
Educated and learned.
Yeah.
There is a path. Okay. So as I mentioned in the first podcast about, my musical expertise is purely emotional. I like what I like. Mm-hmm. I'm not very learned. And it spans punk rock to like country music pre-Garth Brooks. The album that I want you to listen to is Marty Robbins.
All right.
Gunfighter Ballads.
Gunfighter Ballads. I'm going to love this.
You really are. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a lot of storytelling.
Meshuggah is not beautiful.
That's fine.
Right. But you have to read the lyrics as you listen to the songs because you won't understand any of the lyrics. You have to read them.
Is it a lot of... And what he's actually saying is, my dog licked my butthole.
No. It's better than that.
Okay.
Like, there's a lot of, like, dirge metal, doom metal, and stuff like that. And I know that it just sounds like screaming, but I feel like this guy's screaming is better than other people's screaming.
Okay.
I feel like it's more musical than can be explained, but you might just listen to it and be like, this is all bullshit. I don't like it. So maybe we should pick 2 albums.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think... And look, I mean, the thing is we're supposed to have experiences.
Right.
And there's a thing in the TV...
Well, what if I gave you a choice between...
No. This is this is what I'm listening to.
Okay.
There's no backtracks. All right. There's no backseats.
Now I'm listening to Gunfighter Ballads.
Yes.
All right.
We're gonna move forward. So I wanted you to also listen to another album, and then I realized, well, that's more rock and roll, bluegrass rock and roll.
Uh-huh.
And I really love the album, and I think it's
Right.
great, but it's not country, and I really wanted to give you something country. And I asked you specifically to make it heavy metal.
Right.
And I definitely I've never listened to these fucking guys.
So I was going to pick just like an Yngwie album that I haven't listened to, and obviously you haven't listened to, just because Yngwie is like, what if Eddie Van Halen really leaned into the classical side of metal and tapping and sort of being like a principal violinist. Like, but he's still 80s sleazy guitar guy.
So, did you listen?
I really wanted to be harder than that.
Did you listen to Diamond Dave or David Lee Roth? David Lee Roth was the original singer for
Yes.
Okay. David Lee Roth was on Joe Rogan.
I did catch some clips, yeah.
Okay, and in one of the clips, he talks about how Eddie Van Halen came up with those solos and everything.
Right, he would record multiple solos.
6.
And then he would fade in and out of them and then go learn like the best version of the 6 solos when you piece them together.
I feel like that is exactly what you just described.
It sort of is, because Yngwie and Eddie are often spoken of in the same breath.
Right, because I feel like Eddie...
So maybe I'll save Yngwie for another...
Eddie Van Halen is that technical. Like, because to do 6 songs and then to fade them in and out, to like choose the best way to do it, which is why David Lee Roth says he's doing something down here, and then he jumps up here and then down here because his hands are all over the place, is because... he's doing technical stuff in layers. Have
you ever seen the show Metalocalypse?
Fuck yes.
Right. So Yngwie is one of their inspirations. Yngwie's playing is where Metalocalypse gets all of that Swissgard Swizzelf shit from, and Toki Wartu. That's where that comes from. It's Yngwie.
So I'm such a big fan of Murderface. Like, it's not even
William Murderface. Nathan Explosion. Right. Now, Nathan Explosion...
Come on, guys. It's not really... Oh, shit.
It's not so bad. Let's just go get fucked up.
And that's why we're not voice actors.
That is correct.
But what I do love the fact is that when we do these episodes, and I'd like to continue to do it...
Yeah.
Where we announce what we're doing. This gives the opportunity for our listeners to listen to the albums. So if we do more than one each, that's 4 albums, right?
Right.
As opposed to just 2 albums, they're able to digest and they'll have their own opinions.
Yeah.
And, they're a part of the conversation. They have the opportunity to be a part of the conversation.
I can't wait until we have this on a service where people can comment and just fucking light me up.
It's already
tell me just how full of shit I am.
It is already on a service.
Okay.
we can't
a commenting service.
Right. Spotify has a message system.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, fucking let me know.
Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. We had a great time talking about John Coltrane, Blue Train, and
the Butthole Surfers, Electriclarryland.
I had a great time tonight. I hope you guys did. Kyle, did you have a good time?
Party.
Hey, join us next time when I talk about Meshuggah, Destroy, Erase, Improve.
And I'll be talking about Gunslinger Ballads, right? Gunfighter Ballads?
Gunfighter Ballads. Marty Robbins.
And for everyone out there,
peace.
Peace.